I met Liz in 2013 when I was 28, and she was 30 on a sports-related online forum. The community centered on passionate discussions about sports, and from the start, Liz struck me as intelligent, well-mannered, and practical. We hit it off and communicated frequently for about 6 months, and after some time, we began visiting each other every weekend. A year later, we had discussed the possibility of living together. I'm from New Jersey, and she's from a small provincial town, but I was open to the idea, especially since I wanted a family at that point. So I was ready for marriage. She had a clear condition, though, if she were moving with me. We needed to be officially married. It was an agreement made by mutual consent, and as I was also eager to settle down, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Looking back, I've learned some hard lessons about relationships. The first rule I'd share is never marry a woman who's older than you, unless the man is twice as energetic. Otherwise, the older partner will often try to dominate the relationship, justify it by claiming they have more life experience or wisdom. In my case, Liz was the one who dominated, and despite my best efforts, I couldn't avoid the constant pressure. There was always a battle of wills, where I had to stand my ground just to prevent myself from being worn down. It wasn't that I wanted to resist, but the energy it took to maintain any semblance of balance was exhausting. Another major lesson came from taking Liz away from her mother. That was a mistake I'll never forget. When Liz moved in with me, her mother was very attached to her, and that became an issue. After we settled into a rented apartment, Liz started a new job, but it didn't take long for things to unravel. Her mother would often come into the picture, either trying to pull Liz back or bad-mouthing me. There were constant confrontations, which only intensified when our son was born. His birth was difficult, and we were left to cope on our own, without much help. Liz's mother did briefly come to help after the birth, but she lasted only one night, citing health issues, and then left. That was a defining moment. We were essentially raising our child on our own. After 5 years of living in the same apartment, we decided to move to Europe. Liz had received a job offer, and several of our friends had relocated there, sharing stories about a better quality of life than we had in America. I, too, thought it was a good opportunity for us. We moved there on Liz's work contract, and I did my best to make things work. However, after 6 months, when I thought everything was finally set, son in kindergarten, life established, things began to unravel. Liz's career took off, but with it came a heavy shift in dynamics. She started exerting more and more pressure on me, and I began to feel like I was being pushed out of my own life. At first, I didn't understand what was happening, but the more I read psychological books and tried to make sense of our relationship, the clearer it became. We were in a toxic, unhealthy situation. I began to realize that I was being manipulated. Liz became more controlling, demanding passwords to my social media accounts, and accusing me of infidelity without cause. When I turned the tables and asked for the same transparency, she exploded with anger and blamed me for the lack of trust. It was a turning point, but the real shock came when one night, her phone was left unattended, and I saw the messages. Love messages. At that moment, everything clicked. Liz had a lover, a younger man at her workplace. And to add insult to injury, she justified her affair by blaming me for not giving her enough attention. She claimed that since I wasn't romantic enough or spending enough time with her, she was justified in having an affair. The anger and betrayal I felt in that moment were overwhelming. It wasn't just that she had cheated. It was how she twisted the entire situation to make me the villain. The collapse of our marriage came soon after. The divorce was inevitable, but what hurt most was the impact on our son. Liz threatened to drag out the legal battle and make everything as difficult as possible for me, including using our child as leverage. After a year and 2 months of escalating tensions, we finalized a divorce. I packed up my things, gathered my documents, and returned to America, feeling like a fugitive. I had no money and no sense of stability. I was returning to my home country, but it felt like everything I had built over the past decade had been shattered. For a while, I was lost. I couldn't even bear to be around women after the heartbreak. But strangely enough, a few months later, I struck up a friendship with a prostitute, a young, polite, and attractive woman. We didn't have any emotional attachment, just companionship, and over time, It helped me to heal. We parted ways after about a year, and by then, I had finally distanced myself from the painful memories of my marriage. Now, at 38, I have a stable income from a small business I run. Life is different, but I'm managing. I've made significant changes. I bought a motorcycle, finally fulfilling a childhood dream, and even a Jeep. I bought a small house by the sea, a place to call my own. It's not extraordinary, but it's mine and I live within my means. I've come to appreciate the simpler things. And although there are downsides, like the lack of steady relationships and having to deal with everyday challenges on my own, there's a sense of calm in it all. If I were to reflect on how I've grown, it would be in the lessons I've learned. The first and most important rule after a breakup is not to rush into a new relationship. Women can sense vulnerability, and many are drawn to men in emotional recovery, often for the wrong reasons. At my lowest, I was an easy target, but it took time to rebuild my confidence and self-worth. I've also learned never to rekindle things with an ex trying to revive an old relationship is a dangerous game that creates false hope for both sides. And when it comes to financial matters, always be careful. It's essential to have clear agreements about money, especially in a marriage. There's a reason why many relationships fall apart when finances are involved. Life is simpler now, and I'm focused on moving forward. The scars of the past remain, but they no longer define me. Everyone eventually faces it. The moment when a shift occurs, usually triggered by the arrival of children. Over time, the dynamic of the relationship changes, and you stop being the beloved partner you once were. Instead, you become a provider, a problem solver, and a source of income. This is where many men lose themselves. So it's crucial to maintain your independence and avoid falling into this trap. Now, I live alone and it's no longer a burden. I've found peace in my routine. Mornings start with breakfast, followed by a day of work, and evenings are spent with dinner, reading, and then sleep. Weekends are for complete detachment, often spent with friends. The key to maintaining balance is having a hobby, something that occupies your mind and gives you a sense of purpose. The only real pain I still feel is a near-complete lack of communication with my son since the divorce. I always knew this might happen, but it doesn't make it any easier. I miss him terribly, but I'm powerless to change the situation. My ex has made it almost impossible for us to maintain any connection, and he's still too young to organize visits on his own. It's a painful reality, but it's one I have to accept. As for the future, I do think about having a family again, but if it happens, it will be entirely different. I'm no longer interested in the traditional notions of marriage, joint real estate, or business ventures. A relationship, if it comes, will be based on mutual respect, understanding, and a genuine connection, not the obligations and compromises that come with legal ties. It's better to live on your own terms than to endure a loveless, toxic relationship. Above all, the most important lesson I've learned is to let go of negativity. I've created a peaceful space for myself, a little sanctuary where I can heal and grow. I've come to realize that living in a family without love is unbearable. It's far better to be alone than to stay trapped in that kind of misery. And the best form of revenge against my ex is simple: to be happy without her, to build a life that fulfills me, to take back control of my happiness and make it my own.